Hello and welcome to Tech for Non-Techies, the only podcast that demystifies the fast-growing technology sector. I'm your host, Sophia Matveeva, Chicago-based MBA and tech entrepreneur. My aim here is to give you the skills, knowledge and confidence to find opportunities in the tech sector, whether that's through founding a company, getting a dream job, or bringing a fresh perspective to your work.
Hello, smart people. How are you today? I am still in Russia, enjoying the delights of Moscow, which is a beautiful and very fun city. And I'm also enjoying the delights of my family's country house, where I am currently recording this intro from the cellar. And to continue our tradition of quotes, I want to share an old Russian saying with you. Basically, when someone offers you a crappy deal, you say, "They rode up to me on a goat." Basically, it's from the time when men would ride up to fair ladies on their stallions and say, "Fair maiden, come to my castle and let me whisk you away on my noble steed." Which actually sounds quite nice, and I would be totally up for that. So if you have a noble steed and a castle, get in touch. But if the guy makes you a shitty offer, then you say that he's on his goat. It's funny, and you also know that he looks like a bloody plonker. This saying can be applied to job offers, party invitations, and pretty much anything else. If it's a crap offer, they're on a goat. So you tell them to sort themselves out and come back to you on a stallion. And now, on to tech. Today we're going to hear from Souvik Bhattacharya about what it's like to be a product manager at Apple and at Amazon. And whatever you say about big tech, generally, if they want to make you a job offer, they do not arrive riding goats. Product manager jobs in big tech tend to be interesting and well paid. But they are incredibly varied. This is why we're doing this episode, because I want you to know what you might be getting in for. And if you're thinking, but I don't want to be a product manager, I want to be an investor or a founder, or I just want to understand how big tech works, this session is relevant to you anyway. So founders tend to play the product management role in their startup, so it is definitely a job that you need to learn to do. Product managers tend to combine user perspectives, business needs, and technology capabilities. So having a basic understanding of what they do is useful if you want to understand how tech companies work in general. Also, what I like about this session is that you just get an insider's view into how the products you use every day get made. If you want to start a tech-enabled business and you're a non-technical founder, I'm holding a free masterclass for you in a couple of weeks' time. We will go through the top mistakes that non-technical founders make and how to avoid them. And literally attending this class will save you a ton of cash and stress. And it's free, so you have to come. Just register at techfornontechies.co/free class or join the link in the show notes. Now, let's hear from Souvik. Welcome to Tech for Non-Techies. It is such a pleasure to have you here. And you are a product manager, Souvik. You're a product manager currently in Amazon. Previously, you worked at Apple, but then you did a bunch of interesting things before, which were definitely not big tech. And you also got your MBA. So quite an eclectic, interesting career. I'd love to find out, what does a product manager actually do? Like when you get to work, what do you do?
Sure. That's a very interesting question because I think if you ask this question to different product managers, they would all give you a very different answer, because not only product managers do different stuff based on company to company, but also from team to team. Product managers are very culture-driven, very team-driven function. So I'll tell you what I have done, and that might give the audience some idea of what it might be like. So I've been a product manager at a very nimble, small startup in the past. I've been a PM at Apple, and I've been a PM at Amazon. And all of these three has been very, very different. So most recently, in my role at Amazon Web Services, which is Amazon's product and services for for the cloud for big enterprise customers. So most recently, my product management role has been defining the product vision of a specific service. So just to give you a quick background, I work for a product called Amazon S3, which is, the largest object storage cloud in the world. So I own a particular service. So my day-to-day is just to think about how can I get that customer experience using my service better. And that could be done in multiple different ways. Like you could think of, launch new features that customers are asking for, right? Mm-hmm. The second one is also improving your feature set to improve on that customer experience. But also, I think there is this third thing that I think is unique to this whole cloud SaaS, which is software as a service ecosystem, is basically things can get very complicated. Things can, as you zoom out of your boxes and your computers, you think of big things like architecture, for example. Think of the basic app that you download from an app store or from your computer. That app has so many different layers of technology, and they all need to talk to each other. So a large part of my job is also to talk to customers, understand what their use cases are, understand where they are successful and where they're not, and to take that feedback in to the product vision and then constantly shape and change that product vision. So that's I would say the core of the job of a product manager. Then there is this other side of things where you also work incredibly cross-functionally. Like, for example, every single time you launch a product, you are not just the product manager, you're also the product marketer, so to speak, right? Let's say after launch, you are trying to build adoption to your product, then you're also the salesperson. So you end up wearing a lot of different hats as a product manager. So what you do on the day-to-day often depends on the life cycle of the product that you're on right now. Is it being launched? Is it post-launch? Is it at the conception phase? So that's, I would say, overall, that's been my job at AWS. And I think it would be quite similar to most PM jobs in highly technical functions.
It's really interesting that you brought up the marketing point. So right now, so on Tech for Non-Techies, we've now got 3 courses because our audience is taking us in an interesting direction. So one, the way it all started was Tech for non-technical founders. But then people who aren't founders, but people who work in tech companies started taking it. But I realized they didn't need the founder stuff. And now we have a course on how to transition into a career in tech. And so we've got these things running. And I've recently updated some of the content because I realized we had all the stuff on product development and the tech industry, and we didn't have marketing because I was thinking, well, yes, marketing is part of product development, but there are so many marketing courses out there that if I start doing that, this person, my students will never actually finish the course, will just be here forever. But eventually I caved and I ended up having to insert literally just a week of how to bake marketing into your product. Because literally in my experience as an entrepreneur, as a product manager as well, you just can't divorce one from the other. And I heard a really good phrase that just really made me think, which was, it's innovation plus adoption equals insight. So basically, if you have an innovation and you have some adoption, so you have some people using it, then you can get insight. But if all you have is an innovation and it's like you and your cat with this innovation, you're not going to get any insight on how is it being used, is it being adopted, where shall we take it? So it's so interesting that you brought up this point. And I think a lot of non-techies, they think, well, marketing, that's something really fluffy. I'm not going to do that. I want to learn hard skills. But you just demonstrated that without that, literally, it would just you wouldn't get anywhere. You wouldn't have any insight.
Yeah, I also generally, rebel at the whole labeling marketing as soft. Marketing can be really, really hard. There's a flood of data scientists within the tech industry, and a large chunk of what they do is actually inputs to marketing. So marketing can be a very, very hard skill to master. So at Apple, things are very different. And, like your experience would be quite different if you are on hardware versus if you're on software and things like that. Like, for example, Apple has a tremendous focus on hardware. So if you look at, like general stereotypes in the Valley, like if you want to be really good at hardware, you go to Apple. And if you want to be like really good at software, you go to Google. And Google doesn't make incredible hardware products, it tries. And Apple is not really known for its software. So I think those two distinctions apply. So now keeping that stereotype in mind, if you go to Apple and you're a hardware PM, I think your experience would be very different from other PMs in the Bay Area, where a large chunk of your job is creating and curating that customer experience. So a lot of product decisions at Apple is very engineering driven. So it's a very engineering heavy culture, which is awesome for engineers, which is why also they get so many incredible products out the door. But as a product manager, I don't think you get a lot of visibility or say in those product decisions. And, it could be different from like product to product. But generally speaking, a product manager's job is to make a product successful after it's been built. So, like a large
Apple.
Yeah, especially Apple hardware, because think about when products get launched at Apple, right? You're only looking at an annual cycle at best, right? Like then you're not going to launch an iPhone every 3 months, right? So an iPhone or an iPad launch that is slated for September, for the September event, is probably been planned 3-4 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. And so a big chunk of product decisions get taken generations ahead of time. So as a product manager, your job then becomes how to make that successful. So
is it a marketing job then?
I would say it's a lot closer to marketing. So, and Apple doesn't really have a strong distinction between product management and product marketing. So you would see their whole PM role is actually called worldwide product marketing for some functions and product management for some functions, but they essentially do the same thing. I would say it's different for software. It's different for software because product managers get to run a lot of user research. They get to do things like, I know Steve Jobs would hate it, but focus groups also look at, like customer behavior in their own native ecosystem and things like that. So I think if you're working as a software PM within Apple, you have the creativity to drive some form of product vision. And I was lucky enough to work for a manager at that time who was leading Apple notes and reminders. So I got to sit in meetings when he was driving roadmap, which is, I would say, not the standard at Apple, especially if you're at hardware. So that's kind of how Apple works. But also because Apple is, sorry, I feel like you have a question.
So I thought that Apple was a design-driven organization because, when you think of Johnny Ive or if you read the Steve Jobs biography, it's all about design. And so it's like the impression that I had was that it's designers at the top followed by engineers. And I remember I was in Silicon Valley and I had a lunch meeting with an engineer at Apple, and he kind of turned up and he was kind of moping and he was clearly feeling sorry for himself and like his fancy sports car. and I said, how's work? How's it going? And he was like, well, at Apple, we the engineers, we're just slaves to the designers. They're the number ones. Because, I think at the Valley, as an engineer, you think like you're God. And then he went to Apple and he just wasn't used to, not being God.
Yeah, I think that's a totally fair argument. I think especially for hardware, designers have a lot of say. But I would say also like, industrial design, I would put that in the engineering umbrella because, most of them are engineers. Most of them are not, UX, if you will. Like, I think for us, a lot of what we think is design, we often overlap it with like user interface, user experience, and things like that. But Apple has an industrial design team that would, dictate how products would look like, how customers would use those products. Then I would put that in the engineering bucket as well. Like engineering, I don't think it's also like, okay, I'm just following a blueprint, but also I'm designing and conceptualizing that product. But yeah, I think you're totally right. Industrial design has such a big say at how Apple builds products that, engineers can often feel a little bit constrained by having designers. But at the same time, engineers don't often think of features in other companies as well. I think engineers are often more like, okay, let me think about how we can solve this customer problem that has been already identified by a product manager. Mm-hmm. So I think that way engineering at Apple is kind of similar to other tech companies, but they hold a lot of clout, like 100%. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would say that's how Apple is different. I think the other element of difference at Apple is because how everything is, bound to hardware, right? And hardware launches once a year or once in 2 years. So it is significantly more challenging to do incremental improvements at Apple. Like think about your Gmail app, right? Like your Gmail app that you're using on your web, for example, on your computer, it doesn't take Google anything to just release an update, right? It just can get updated the next time you refresh your browser. But for Apple to push an update, they will have to wait for a September launch or a WWDC. And that also needs to associate with the broader theme of that year. So pushing or improving a product at Apple, I would say it's significantly more challenging. The other thing at Apple is that, if you roll out an update, it automatically goes to millions of people, right? So if you're not precise about the build, it can have some vast impact. Websites like Amazon, Google, they're constantly running like 100, 200 A/B tests in the background, right? An A/B test, just to make sure people know what it is. An A/B test is basically you have a group where you don't send a change to, and you have a group you do send the change to, and you compare the difference in behavior from those two updated and non-updated groups, like a randomized control trial. Apple doesn't have that luxury to just run multiple A/B tests. They will have to make that update perfect because it's going to launch at the same time to millions of customers, not just millions, like hundreds of millions of customers. So that can be very exciting for some people. That can also be very constrained for some people. So, but that's just how it works. Like you have to, when you're at Apple, you just have to be okay with that release cycle dilemma.
Tell us about Amazon. How is that different? Because you're working very much on the software side over there. So how does your job differ?
Yeah, so I think how Amazon works is also quite similar to how Google works as well. And both Amazon and Google are primarily software companies. They are primarily software and service companies. So they're not constrained by hardware launches. So I would say Amazon and Google are much faster. You'll constantly have to be on your toes because if you sleep for a day and you wake up and there are like 10 new services that Amazon and Google just launched that you have to catch up on. So for us, things are a little bit different. Like, for example, because I work on the software and the services side of things, I have a different kind of constraint and a different kind of independence. So let me tell you what I mean. So when I talk about a different kind of independence, like most of my software, most of my service is virtual, right? So I can make changes without having to wait for a specific release cycle, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a good level of independence. You're always thinking about features. Like at Amazon has a very peculiar way of writing product documents. It's called a press release. So if you are thinking about a product, the way to convince people to rally behind your product is to write a 6-page document. It's called the press release with the frequently asked questions. So it's sort of assuming that you've already launched the product, right? So assume you've already launched the product. How are you going to talk about it? Which to me is like a really, really cool working backwards process, because you're thinking that your customers are using this product already. So you can already think from their point of view and then lay out their journey rather than going forwards, which is, let me understand the customer problem and let me build features to address those customer problems and see how we can solve other problems as we go. So it's a really cool process. It can be daunting at the beginning, but you kind of get used to it. But so, for example, this year I've written multiple PR facts, and some of it might be launched this year. Some of it might be launched 3-4 years from now. But Amazon, and I'm guessing by extension Google, gives you this agility to constantly think of new product ideas. The other thing where I think Amazon especially is super different is because Amazon furiously keeps launching products. Like you have so many products, and Amazon doesn't, I think, expect all of them to be successful. And I think there's an inherent awareness that not all of these will be successful, but we're going to try anyway. And then we're going to see what is resonating with our customers and what is not.
What an entrepreneurial note to end on. I told you this was relevant for founders and investors, not only product managers. And remember, if you want to start a tech-enabled business, then register for the Non-Technical Founder Masterclass. Just go to techfonontechies.co/free class or have a look in the show notes. And if you're loving what you're learning, because honestly, who wouldn't, then come and join us as a member at Tech for Non-Techies. Our membership is your guide in the jargon-filled world of tech. We have live sessions with experts like Suvik and masterclasses with me. You also get coaching sessions and learning notes on key aspects of technology like AI, product management, and the app economy, written in a way that non-techies can actually understand and even enjoy. Our members include alumni of Harvard, Oxford, and of course the University of Chicago, people who are buying companies, building businesses, and leading innovation. And this is pretty epic, and I'm very proud of our very smart community. If you want to join us, then check us out on techfonontechies.co/membership. That's it for now, my darlings. I have to escape this cellar before I freeze, so I will be speaking to you next week from London. Ciao.